session of the Board of Administration, and first order of business is roll call.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Deborah Gallegos for Malia Cohen.
Here.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma.
Present.
Lisa Middleton.
Present.
Arena Ortega.
Here.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Here.
Kevin Pauke.
Morning.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Present.
Yvonne Walker.
Excused?
Here.
Oh, she is here.
Melissa Willett.
Here.
Dr. Gail Willis.
Okay, thank you. Let me know when Ms. Willis gets on. We are going to recess open session and go into closed session for item 1. From the closed session, we will immediately reconvene in open session after the closed session. Thank you. And let me know when everybody's appropriate. Everybody, we are back in open session. This adjourns the Board of Administration part of this. We are now going to move into PCTM. Anybody want to tell me 5 minutes? Because I know we have to move. Okay, 5 minutes? Yeah. All right, so thank you very much.
Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee to order, and if we can have a roll call, please.
Melissa Willett,
Here.
Kevin Palkey,
Good morning.
Lisa Middleton,
Present.
Arena Ortega, Jose Luis Pacheco,
Present.
Teresa Taylor,
Here.
Yvonne Walker.
Here.
Thank you. And because we are not all present in the same room and board members are participating from remote locations that are not accessible to the public, Bagley Keene requires the remote board members to make certain disclosures about any other persons present with them during open session. Accordingly, the board members participating remotely must each attest either that they are alone, or if there are one or more persons present with them who are at least 18 years old, the nature of the board member's relationship to each person. At this time, I will ask Yvonne to verbally attest accordingly. Please conduct the
I
roll.
attest that I'm alone.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. We will now move to item 2, our executive report. Mr. Hoffner.
Thank you very much, and good morning, members of the committee. Doug Hoffner, CalPERS team member, glad to be with you today. We have item C3, which will present by the board's consultants, the biennial review of the Performance Comp and Talent Management Committee delegation. No changes are being recommended at this time. But should the committee wish to make any changes, those revisions would be incorporated and brought back for consideration of the delegation and review process as the other committees have done. I would like to point out there is one error in the agenda item. It says that we review this annually and consistent with governance policies, that should read biannually. So I want to make sure that was clear in that item, which is on the consent agenda. Before you today, well, is item 5A, and again, GGA will be providing this review. It's part of your board's policy to review the annual incentive metrics on an annual basis, and of course, providing feedback or direction to the consultants should you have any. There are no items for action today. These are information only, and then anything coming forward will be brought back in June for the committee to finalize for the next fiscal year for those that are eligible in both the executive and investment management positions. Those metrics will also be included in the CO's fiscal year 24-25 incentive plan, again, brought to you in June of this year. In advance, I'd like to identify a couple things that we'll be bringing back to you in the later parts of this year as part of your board policy. We'll be providing the comparator groups for the compensation review that's done on a biannual basis. That will be brought back in the spring of 2025 per the policy, and that will be something that the HR team, along with McLaughlin and GGA, will be working on later this fall. With that, Mrs. Chair, this concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee? Nope. All right. Thank you so much for that report. And we will move to our action consent items 3A through 3C. It has been moved by Ms. Taylor and it has been seconded by Mr. Pacheco. Okay. And can we please get a roll call vote?
Kevin Palkey,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton, Arena Ortega, Jose Luis Pacheco, Teresa Taylor, Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
Okay. And that passes. We will move to our information consent items. And our information, and none have been asked to be pulled, so we will move to our information agenda items. Ms. Tucker.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Michelle Tucker, CalPERS team member. Item 5A is an information item. To comply with the board's policy, incentive metrics are reviewed annually by the board's primary compensation consultant, Global Governance Advisors. GGA will present their initial analysis and observations on the incentive metrics for the board's and for the committee's consideration and discussion today. Based on the committee's feedback, they'll return in June 2024 with final recommendations for implementation in fiscal year 24-25. Final board-approved metrics will include some combination on incentive plans for eligible executive and investment management positions. That concludes my opening remarks, so if you wish, we can invite Mr. Landers and Mr. Kelly to begin the presentation.
Yes, please. Mr. Landers, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, everyone. So just to sort of set the stage, we've reviewed your historical metrics that you've used for the past few years. It's as documented in the memo that was sent out, and they all, to us, still make a lot of sense to include within the incentive program. So we're not necessarily advising that you have to change any of the specific metrics at this time. And when we looked just overall, one of the things that was noted was there has been working with the data collection team that does a lot of your stakeholder survey results. There have been just some very high-level data collection methodologies that have been sort of adopted and considered over the past year or so. We've reviewed that with them. We're comfortable that they're trying to move all of that in the right direction in the spirit of just collecting as robust and as representative of data from those stakeholder satisfaction results. So we recommend that those specific changes are something that we will see be adopted moving forward for 24-25, and that's sort of an ongoing annual process that that team goes through. And the only other thing that came to our mind was when we looked at your overall pension fund peers, there is some evidence of organizations looking at environmental or climate change focused objectives. And this isn't a debate about divestment and things like that. It's more about operationally looking at specific maybe ESG or environmentally or climate change related objectives that you've made as an organization, and potentially looking at that something in the future to consider and monetize or incentivize people to achieve at the end of the day. Other things included things like improving and enhancing upon your overall environmental disclosure as an organization, what you disclose in your sustainability reports, things like that. And then the only other area that sometimes has come up is just increasing the overall intensity of your carbon or low carbon assets within the portfolio. So these are just examples of the types of metrics that we're starting to see in the marketplace, especially around pension fund peers, some of your pension fund peers. And again, it's just something that we're not saying you have to adopt anything right now or adopt any different metrics, but it's something that I think working with us as your advisors, you want to just keep a track of, keep monitoring the progress. Is this becoming a bigger and bigger trend in the marketplace? And when it gets to that point in the future, we can definitely work with you in terms of establishing what those metrics might look like from an operational perspective. So those are really the two little things that we, more sort of things to just consider, review as a committee and as a full board. And then the other areas are very similar to what we've really been advocating for the past several years. These things fall under your CEO and your CIO's delegated authority. So there's something that, they are to consider and they can then implement within the investment team. And these are similar to what we've done in past years, looking at, your overall weighting, quantitative versus qualitative, and over time, looking to get that for your investment staff a little bit closer to the typical market averages that we see. And then certain things in your asset class, for your asset class professionals, adding in that asset class weighting. But that's something that, we've talked about, we've advocated for, but naturally with the turnover in your CIO, obviously you have a new incoming CIO coming on board. That is something that I think more formal and more direct changes are probably something to wait until next year once that CIO has had a chance to come in, establish what their philosophy and their culture is that they're trying to incent among your investment team, and maybe come back with some recommended changes at that time. So really those are the key takeaways. The rest of the memo really just gives you a little bit more historical background. The only other thing that I'll mention is what we'll be coming back in June with is, yes, the metrics, yes, the weightings on those metrics, but we'll also be doing some historical look-back analysis. It's been 2 or 3 years since we last did that, and we might come forward with some tweaks to what those performance hurdles are at a threshold, a target, and sort of that maximum level. So we'll be coming back with those recommendations based on some of that analysis in June. And that's when, of course, you'll be making some decisions on what those hurdle rates and that look like for the CEO and then for the broader staff as well. So we'll be coming back again in June with that information.
Just for a point of clarification for this committee, for your board, and for your members, our observation around the climate change trends that we're seeing, and by no means are we saying that you need to put something in place. We We recognize that your board and your fund is you're principally a prime mover in this space and proudly a prime mover. However, there's still a lot of work to be done within the investment community within this space, a lot of consternation and debate, as you know, and so therefore we just want you to understand that we're just seeing this as a trend, and that we would advise you take some time to wait to see what is actually transcribing within the market before you take any action going forward.
Thank you. And I have a request to speak from Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you. Brad and Peter, I read through the whole report. Looks great. I'm still kind of trying to figure out where we go, right, to make sure that when we don't hit our benchmarks, that we're holding our folks accountable, that they shouldn't be getting a bonus, or at least a whole bonus for sure, right? Pardon me, I'm completely, yay, allergies. I think this building too, every time I come in here. So I had a couple of questions. First, yay on the environmental thing, because I think we're also doing that on proxy voting, right? So we're holding other companies responsible and asking other companies to start reporting, whether or not, they're holding their higher ups accountable to environmental standards, right? Or meeting Climate Action 100 plus standards or Paris Agreement, whatever, right? So I think that's a good idea. We just have to figure out the how, right? How we do that. The asset class, and I was here when we changed this, so we were very concerned that people were very siloed. So that's my other concern with the asset class, because they were. So how we figure that one out as well. And I think we take all of this together and move forward with that. Go ahead. I see you reaching for the button.
Sorry. No, I think, and this is something that, you want to make sure, and I know part of that was a former CIO's philosophy, and there had been some historical silos that had developed within the team that you were trying to break down. So I think it was a noble thing that they moved in that direction. I think that's something that is still more of a wait and see. Obviously, you have the new CIO coming on board the next few months. You'll want to make sure that whatever structure you're putting in place is aligning with their vision for the investment team, because you wouldn't want to put something in before they're in place and then you're sort of reverting back. So that is something that definitely I think is a wait and see on that approach. One thing you could do, and consider, and we've put that in there, and again, this is more under Marcy's authority, is moving the needle in terms of increasing that quantitative weighting, the weighting that would at this point go on total fund investment performance. If you look at some of the detailed tables, that 60-40 mix for the investment team is a little bit lower on that sort of quantitative side than what you see in the broader marketplace. So to your point around making sure you hold people accountable, obviously we made the adjustments a year or two ago to the hurdle rates for total fund to make sure that you weren't paying anything out for missing or not beating the benchmark. So we made that positive development. This would be, I think, something that you could consider to further emphasize sort of that that weighting on driving towards rewarding people only when there is outperformance. So that is something that is in our documents that we've been advocating for a few years. So that's something definitely that could, if you think of it that way, in terms of holding people accountable to those hard quantitative total fund results, as opposed to having a little bit higher weighting than usual on the qualitative side of things. But I know Marcy and the team have other rationale for why they might want it to keep the mix the way it is, but that is something, if that was a big concern, that is a direction you could move.
What would you say? I can see that the slide I'm looking at shows us and STIRS, and it's significantly different, right? So what is our thoughts behind keeping our quantitative high, right, where they're really pretty kind of low, depending on the position, right? So what's driving them to do that versus what's our thinking behind ours.
Yeah, perfect. So if you look at the investment team, they definitely are a little bit higher weighted actually on the quantitative side. Definitely there are certain roles like Marcy's role in that they are lower. I think they look at that in terms of the role itself and the amount of influence that one has over the overall total fund investment results. And they've taken a view that they'd rather look at long-term strategic performance, individual performance in the role. On our side of things, we actually like to see more quantitative. That's why we actually like and prefer the structure you have here, because yes, Marcy has a higher quantitative weighting, but it's not all on investment performance. There are other things that Marcy, as the CEO of CalPERS, has control over in terms of operational costs, things like that. Other areas like effectiveness, things like customer or client member satisfaction and stakeholder satisfaction results. So you've actually put in quantitative measures to measure other areas of performance that Marcy as CEO has control over. That's why we're not as concerned with that lack of, that's the big difference. I think they probably look at some of those things, but they do it more on an overall qualitative lens as opposed to having specific measurable saying if you hit this, you'll earn this. So that's why we haven't been as fussed with some of the spread. If we were looking at it and saying Marcy's 75% weighted on total fund investment performance, then we would, I think, have a concern with that. But because you've broken it down nicely between, yes, some investment performance, but also other areas that she has impact over, we're less concerned with that gap or that spread.
Okay, great. I was a little concerned when I saw these numbers. I was like, wow, that's a big difference. But yeah, I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
And if I could just add real quickly, Teresa, in response to how we recognize asset class performance, and perhaps that's not currently on the quantitative side, which is completely within your discretion. How we handle that is through the calibration process that we do in August of every year. We calibrate the incentives across all of the asset classes. And if we have outsized asset class performance in relative to the rest of the classes, then that group is eligible for higher scores. And so we are rewarding them through the incentive plan, through compensation, but it's done more on the qualitative side.
And do you feel like, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, do you feel like staff is satisfied with that?
I don't know. I'm not. I don't have any direct insight into that, other than I guess through our employee engagement survey. But we feel this is a fair way, an equitable way of recognizing the behavior we want to see repeated, and that is performance and behavior.
So I guess the best solution, of course, is waiting for our CIO to come in and make those analyses, right? So I appreciate that. Thank you.
So yeah, I would expect if there are any, call it more material changes, they probably will come forward this time next year when the new CIOs had a chance to weigh in and where they can on that structure.
All right, thank you. Next speaker I have is Mr. Pacheco.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Willette. I'd like to ask you, first of all, thank you for your presentation, again, as I always appreciate you guys explaining this. I'd like to ask you a question on the, under the board authority with respect to the continuing measure to measure stakeholder engagement under our annual incentive plans and how they align with our strategic plans and the proposed changes in the data changes methodology. And I noticed that in the changes, there was a change in the getting the retired members, increasing that target to at least 20%. And I'm wondering if that's a feasible target, and it would provide, would it provide enough power for us to have a robust survey analysis? Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, we worked directly with your survey team that collects the data. They have indicated to us that they're quite confident that if you get that level of response rate, that will be a representative sample of the views, and won't, and so that gives us confidence. We're not survey experts by any means, but they have indicated to us, and working with them, that they're confident that getting to that level historically is quite doable. Also, we'll give a representative sample that can be relied upon in terms of looking at the results. So that gives us confidence that that will lead you to results that are, fair, equitable, representative of the stakeholders.
So let me maybe provide a little more feedback. So in the last cycle, we had a 17.49% response rate by the retirees. So we're striving for at least 20%.
Okay.
And we're looking for statistical validity. And that's been the conversation we've had the last couple of years as to response rates has somewhat declining across the various groups the last sort of 3 years. Mm-hmm. We're really trying to ensure that we have a greater representation. The survey right now is out in the member population. So we'll know in a few weeks what the current status of that is, but really what we're striving for is a greater response rate. We'll know later, in a few weeks what that status of it is, and then we'll go from there.
And historically,
striving for greater improvement in that response, though.
So, Mr. Hoffer, historically it's been about 7% then?
It was 17.5% last cycle.
Okay.
I just know across various groups, it's been declining the last sort of 3 or 4 years. So we had that session at the offsite last year.
Yes.
We talked about things to improve. We've been working on how to do that across the organization, and we'll see if the results of that have translated to increased participation or not, and we'll see, and we'll report back.
Excellent. And I think your conversations were that you had some communication strategies and communicating that out to the stakeholders and for more engagement.
Yeah, we talked about quarterly engaging the communication strategies with our membership, and that is ongoing and will be ongoing for the foreseeable time.
Very good then. Thank you so much. That's all.
If I could add, one thing that we would like this committee to know is that this is a familiar topic that we're hearing from many of our clients with regard to engagement. I think the population writ large is suffering from survey fatigue. And so getting those engagement numbers up is a real challenge. And so because this is an objective element of your incentive plan and people are being rewarded and paid for it, we want to make sure that it is truly reflective of the performance of your people and of your fund, and that people are being rewarded accordingly. And avoiding, as you've said in the past, Mr. Pacheco, the Yelp effect, where people are either extremely satisfied, and so they're giving you're weighing it towards the positive, which is not truly reflective of everyone's experience, or people who they've suffered for some reason something that they're not truly satisfied with, and then you have this weighting on the negative side. So again, we want to make sure that it's balanced and that you have something, as Duggan mentioned, something that is truly reflective, of statistically valid around the performance of your people.
All right, any other questions from the committee? Anyone? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for that presentation, for the information, the memo. Thank you, staff, for all that information. And thank you to the committee for those great questions and dialogue. I have, moving on to the agenda, summary of committee direction. I have not taken any. Is that correct? Okay.
I didn't take any. Thank you, though.
Thank you. So we'll move to public comment, and I have one public comment. I have Kai on for public comment.
Good morning, all members. My name is Kai On. On March 26th, I sent letters to Ms. Teresa Taylor and CEO. I request CalPERS staff, Ms. Griff and Mr. Christopher, to attend CalPERS board meeting to clarify the impersonate email that I received in 2021. The second issue is from last December, I have contacted CalPERS staff, Ms. Hop, and CalPERS senior lawyer, Ms. Andrea, about my health insurance issues, but there's still no actual action to resolve my health insurance issues. So I talked in the board meeting last September. It has been half years. I believe it's reasonable for the Board of Administration to order an investigation about the impersonate email in 2021 and also my health insurance issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no other public comments. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting of the Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee. Minutes? Yeah.
Let's begin at 10:15, give ourselves a break.
Okay. Finance and Administration Committee meeting will begin at 10:15. Thank you.
Order the Finance and Administration Committee. Our first order of business is roll call.
Lisa Middleton.
Present.
David Miller.
Here.
Frank Rufino.
Present.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Present.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Present.
Teresa Taylor. Yvonne Walker.
Here.
Right. Good morning, board members. Because we are not all present in the same room and board members are participating from remote locations that are not accessible to the public, Bagley-Keene requires that the remote board members to make certain disclosures about any other persons present with them during open session. Accordingly, the board members participating remotely must attest either that 1, they are alone, or 2, if there are 1 or more persons present with them who are at least 18 years old, the nature of the board member's relationship to each person. At this time, I would like to ask Ms. Walker to verbally attest accordingly.
I so attest that I am alone and will remain alone for this meeting.
Thank you. With that, I would like to move on to the executive report to Ms. Nix.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Michelle Nix, CalPERS team member. Yvonne added the humor for me today, so I'll just jump right into it. The action consent item today contains a delegation for the FAC, and we recommend no changes to that, so just wanted to point that out. The agenda before you today has 7 action items for your consideration. The 2024-25 annual budget proposal, the annual review of the board member employer reimbursements, Judges Retirement and Judges Retirement 2 Actuarial Valuation Report, Employer and Employee Contribution Rates, State and Schools Valuation, Employer and Employee Contribution Rates, and the Funding Risk Mitigation Policy. In addition, we will review the Long-Term Care Valuation Report and the Semi-Annual Health Plan Financial Report. The next Finance and Administration Committee meeting is scheduled for September 2024 here in Sacramento. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my report, and I would be pleased to take questions at this time.
Are there any questions at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, which is action consent items. I've received a request to remove item 3C for further discussion. Are there any other items that board members would like removed from discussion? Seeing none, if we could, do we need to take a roll call vote on this? All right. Okay, move approval. We've got approval in a second. Roll call, please.
David Taylor.
Aye.
Frank Rufino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Aye.
Teresa Taylor. Yvonne Walker.
Sorry, aye.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to items 3C, and I would ask Ms. Nix and anyone else from staff to give a very short intro to this item, and then we will move on to questions.
Sure. Item C3 is a semi-annual contracting prospective report that we do obviously twice a year since it's semi-annual, and it's reporting to the board anything that exceeds $1 million threshold. Do you want to ask questions at this time?
Certainly. Mr. Pacheco, could you?
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Ms. Nix. Yes, I would like to ask a question on actually page 6 of 12 of the of the item. I'd like to ask about the status of the recent benefit verification letters that were mailed out last month, I believe to a certain population of retired repopulation, and how that may be associated with the upcoming secure contract moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Mr. Pacheco. These are really unrelated. The death verification process is a process that we will continue even post the secure contract. There is no perfect single data source for death information. Unfortunately, I wish we had access to that. But there were 8,130 benefit eligibility letters sent out. Within the last 2 to 3 weeks, we have about a 38.5% response rate with 37 deaths reported to date. Kim Malm, who's our deputy over our customer service areas, will provide you a more fulsome update in her June report. But they are unrelated.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it very much.
Great. Any other questions? Can I get a motion to approve 3C? Motion, second by Mr. Taylor. Roll call, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Aye.
Teresa Taylor.
Aye.
Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
Next item is information consent items. Is there a request to pull any of the information consent items? Mr. Ruffino.
Yes. Oh, that's on. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question of clarification on 4C, please.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. So, Ms. Nix, real quick, I just curious, this is obviously represents the fiscal mid-year report to us, and as of December 2023, the net position of CalPERS Public Employee Retirement Fund increased by 10% since December 31st, 2022, if I'm seeing this correctly, primarily due to more favorable market conditions. So the question is, how did changes in contribution rate impact the total contribution to the PERF as of mid-year 23-24 compared to mid-fiscal year 22-23, and what were the main drivers for these changes?
So the contributions for most went up a little bit, but, and the question was, how did it impact what? The drivers of the overall increase?
Yeah, what were the main drivers for these changes?
So the main drivers of the overall PERF were, as you said, the market experience. So we would have a higher market value at the end of December 31st, 2023. But the contributions also increased slightly, so that would obviously add to the inside of our overall assets.
So good news.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, I guess if you're an employer or an employee, maybe not. But overall, for the PERF in general, yeah, we're in a better position. Our contribution rate, our funded ratio is increased slightly, which you'll hear in the actuarial presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. These were information items, and so no vote is necessary. We'll move on to item 5A on our action agenda item, and that is the 24-25 annual budget proposal. Ms. Nix and Mr. Shafsma.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to Will Shafsma for a presentation on our budget.
Before we start, Chair Middleton, we do have Dr. Gail Willis on the line, so we will need to do the open attestation.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Will Shafsma, CalPERS team member. Today I will be walking you through the 2024-25. Oh.
Do we have something? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. But
the open attestation for Dr. Gail Willis. Yes.
All right. Sorry. So we need Ms. Walker to. Oh, will it? Okay. Because we are not all present in, do I have to read this over again or just, all right, thank you. Because we are not all present in the same room and board members are participating from remote locations that are not accessible to the public, Bagley-Keene requires that the remote board members to make certain disclosures about any other persons present with them during open session. Accordingly, the board members participating remotely must each attest that either one, they are alone, or two, if there are one or more persons present with them who are at least 18 years old, the nature of the board member's relationship to each person. At this time, I'd like to ask board member Willett to, attest.
Yes, this is Dr. Gail Willis. I do attest to being alone.
All right. We'll now move on to item 5A.
Thank you. So today I'm going to walk you through the 2024-25 proposed budget agenda item, which is an action item. And I'll begin by updating you on our current year spending for fiscal year 2023-24. Next slide, please. So as of December 31st, CalPERS has expended $982 million, or roughly 40% of the current year budget. And based on our current projections, we estimate that we will end the fiscal year with a little bit more than $99 million in savings. Next slide, please. So most of the projected savings fall within our operating cost categories. Within administrative operating costs, the savings driver here is position vacancies. Savings within investment operating costs are due to technology modernization project schedule changes and more cost-efficient fee structures. Third-party administrator fees have a projected savings based on fall 2023 open enrollment, including health plan enrollment changes and migration to plans with lower TPA fees. And while overall spending remains within budget, we continue to monitor and assess all expenses to make sure that they are appropriate. And as a reminder, all funds do remain in the PERF until actual expenses are paid. Next slide, please. So moving on to the proposed budget for 2024-25, we are proposing a budget of $2,470 million. This is a $26.6 million or 1.1% increase over the current year budget. And just for a point of reference, our annualized rate of growth from fiscal year 2020-21 through 2024-25 is 9.5%. Next slide, please. So I'll walk you through each of the budget categories, but the primary driver of this year's small increase is from external investment external management fees and headquarter building costs. These budget increases are attributable to the current strategic asset allocation, which assumes more active management and increased allocation to private asset classes, as well as 2 building projects for Lincoln Plaza.
Slide, right? Oh. Have them advance the slide. Oh, yeah.
Can we get to slide 5, please? And next slide. So this is our operating cost category. First category I will discuss is administrative operating costs. This category includes personal services, which are the salaries and benefits we pay to our team, as well as operating expenses and equipment, which is also commonly referred to as OE&E. In 24-25, we propose a total of $614.9 million in this category, which is a 0.3% decrease over the current year. The decrease is primarily driven by planned reductions in software data and consulting services for non-investment related activities. And offsetting this decrease is an increase of $1.1 million for annualized salaries, benefits, and incentives for the 27 investment office positions received in last year's budget to implement the new strategic asset allocation. I would also note that within the administrative operating cost budget, there is a redirection of $4.1 million in projected salary savings to fund various business initiatives and implement new projects. This includes $0.3 million for an actuarial experience study review, $1.6 million for investment office related recruitment services, $0.3 million for compliance and risk program consulting, $0.4 million for investment contract and procurement services, and $1.5 million for health program consultants. And furthermore, the IT services branch will be leveraging some existing OE&E to support a pilot program for artificial intelligence applications within the enterprise. Next slide, please. So our next category is investment operating costs, which are costs specifically incurred for investments. The total proposed for investment operating costs in 24-25 is $146.7 million. This is a $3.9 million or 2.6% decrease compared to the 23-24 budget. The decrease is due to the expiration of some one-time technology consultant services and related systems, infrastructure, and data funding. This is partially offset by an increase in appraisal fees resulting from greater volume and complexity of appraisals to support additional real estate investments. Next slide, please. And our last operating costs category is for the headquarters building. We are proposing an $8.7 million increase to this category. This increase is driven by cost to continue updates to our audio and visual systems in the CalPERS auditorium and to replace fluorescent lighting with LED lighting throughout Lincoln Plaza. Just note on that California statute prohibits the sale of fluorescent lighting after Jan 1, 2025. And increases are also expected for utility rates and contracted service rates. Next slide, please. And this is our external fees budget. These are estimated amounts that are largely influenced by external factors. While CalPERS estimates annual investment external management fees based on market assumptions and estimated deployment of capital, actual fees paid within a fiscal year are subject to market fluctuations. Current assumptions estimate total fees to be $1.4 billion in 2024-25, which is an increase of 4.4% over the 23-24 authorized budget. As a result of the current strategic asset allocation, this increase corresponds to the expected change in the fees paid to external managers. Much of the increase in base fees is for private equity and private debt, with additional but smaller increases anticipated for global equity, fixed income, and real assets. A projected decrease in real assets performance fees reflects projected market conditions, which may lead to slower than anticipated returns. Next slide, please. And this is our third-party administrator fees is our last category here. We are estimating a $36 million decrease in this category. The large driver here is our health program. Reduction is driven primarily by Blue Shield changing from a flex-funded to a fully insured program, and those fully insured programs do not include a TPA fee, as well as migration of members between health plans. We also project a reduction to long-term care program fees due to enrollment declines and continued suspension of new enrollments. And next slide. So here again is our total 24-25 budget. My colleagues and I are happy to answer any questions you may have to inform your action. Thank you.
Are there questions? President Taylor.
Oh, it was. I did my part, man. I didn't have an actual question. I just wanted to commend you all for working to, even with the increases in wages and management fees and everything, working to bring that almost down to a wash. So I just wanted to congratulate you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ruffino.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Echo those comments as well, and the fact that we are not reducing any positions, so that's great. I think I heard you saying that the 4.1% or the 99.1 million saving, it was as a result of salary savings, so positions that they're vacant. And so I'm not sure exactly what your vacancy rate is, but I think the question is, I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of talks, as you know, with the budget deficit, that they want to eliminate any kind of open position. And I don't think that would affect us, would that? Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to understand that we were not subject to, to that particular order if in fact it gets executed or whatever.
You are correct. No position sweeps at CalPERS. So the vacancy rate as of 3/31 for our enterprise is 14.3%. And again, the driver of the savings for the current fiscal year is position vacancies. We are actively trying to reduce that number to our fullest extent. So anticipating that number to go down in future fiscal years. And then there is also, some OE&E savings as we try to, look through our operating expenses and make sure what we're spending is truly needed for the enterprise.
So 14.3% is your vacancy rate right now.
Yeah, so Frank,
approximately.
Yeah, a large number of those are the ones that we gave to the investment office. We gave those positions to them vacant, and it also correlates to the increase in outside search firm assistance to the investment office to be able to fill those positions. So they are making progress. It is slow, in particular for Jean Sue's team, quite slow as she's trying to find competitive salaries when this is a very hot asset class right now, but we do believe that most of these vacancies will be filled in the next months.
Great. Well, like I said, good job, the Administrative Services Division and all your team. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Pacheco.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. First of all, I also want to echo the same thing with my colleagues about this budget. It's very, very good and very robust. And Mr. Ruffino already answered my question about the vacancies, but I just want to just a compliment on that. With respect to the recruitment, are we utilizing the rapid recruitment process to try to fill in these vacancies?
Yes, the rapid recruitment process is very much a part of our strategy to reduce vacancies and has been successful to this point, and we anticipate that lending some capacity to help us reduce the vacancy rate in the future.
And do you have any timeline when you feel it will happen?
Why don't we ask Ms. Tucker to come forward and speak about it? We're not using rapid recruitment for the investment office vacancies, so these would be vacancies elsewhere in the enterprise. But we'll ask Ms. Tucker to talk more generally around recruitment and timetables, et cetera.
Thank you. Good morning, Michelle Tucker, CalPERS team member. Mr. Pacheco, in response to what Mr. Schaafsma mentioned, we are doing several mini rapid recruitments with specific occupational areas. For example, our auditing classifications, I believe several specific areas in CSS have had mini rapid recruitments, so that's kind of a more localized version of the rapid recruitment process that we adopted last year. And then the investment team is, as Ms. Frost mentioned, actively working to fill those vacancies, so we have regular meetings with that team. The HR team as well as the investment team, they meet, I believe, once a week to kind of go over pending vacancies, where we are with various recruitments. So we are actively working on that.
Thank you. I just want to add one more question. It's a correlate with respect to the recent announcement of our relationship with Stanford University and CalPERS Investments. Just wanted to know if that's also part of our strategy and our to recruit the next generations of folks.
Yeah, for certain. So that is also part of our pipeline development. We hear a lot of reasons why we don't see more diversity in certain areas of the investment industry in particular, a lot of attribution to pipeline. So, our thought is and belief is that we will develop our own pipeline to get there. So very important as we bring these students in that we develop that long-lasting relationship so they look at us first when they're out looking for their next employment.
All right, thank you. I look forward to this, all these endeavors and our new budget. Thank you.
Mr. Ruffino.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, a quick comment that trigger when we talked about rapid recruitment, and I'm not sure if it's something that it was granted to CalPERS or maybe other agencies, but regardless, it doesn't matter. But I think it's worth thanking formally and officially, CalHR for working with us and giving us that ability to do this rapid recruiting and everyone that was involved in that process. So good work, CalHR.
Any other questions? I have one. The numbers for third-party administrator fees, that reduction is certainly very pleasing news to all of us. Is that a one-time major reduction? Is this the new baseline for us moving forward, or is there any reason to believe that over the course of the next year we'll see any significant changes?
So that decrease is specific to Blue Shield moving to fully insured, which we would expect to continue at this point, so that budgetary impact would be ongoing and incorporated into future budgets.
Very good. Thank you. Well, I will add my compliments to those of my colleagues. Seeing a 1% budget change in 2024 is a pretty remarkable number, and our compliments to everyone who was involved in this process. So thank you. With that, we need to take a vote. So we have a move approval. So we have a second. Roll call, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Aye.
Teresa Taylor.
Aye.
Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
She's not on the committee. Yeah.
Motion is approved. We will move on to 5B, the annual review of board member employer reimbursements. And again, Ms. Nix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, the boards, those board members that are employed, their employers are reimbursed for salary and benefits paid as they spend time as elected board members for the benefit of CalPERS. And the cost is primarily driven by the committee assignments. So with that, I'm pleased to take questions. It's pretty much a standard item. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those at this time.
All right. Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve? And second? We have second by Mr. Miller. Roll call, please, or roll call vote, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Aye.
Teresa Taylor.
Aye.
Yvonne Walker.
Aye, and I have a question after the vote's done. I didn't get my hand raised in time, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead with your question.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding how this works, the employer reimbursement. I mean, my experience with that is, we used to we'd get a bill from the employer and then we'd send it back out. So I overall just want to know how it works.
I can certainly answer that. We actually have an MOU that we sign between CalPERS and the employer, agreeing on the reimbursement, and the employer bills CalPERS quarterly for the time spent at CalPERS, and then we pay the employer directly.
Okay. And does that account for also like when we go to different meetings?
Yes.
Also?
There's a baseline that's something that we pay every time based on committee assignments, but then if there's any additional work that happens, that can be line itemed, and also it is sent to us with the board member actually reports it to their employer, and then their employer puts it on the invoice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And we did have a vote to approve, so this item is approved. We will move on to 5C, the Judges Retirement System Actuarial Validation Report. And for that, Scott and Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott Trando with the Actuarial Office. We have a number of actuarial evaluations to review today, so I think we'll just jump right in. Quick little note, Tony Cooney was unavailable today, so joining me this morning is Randy Zubek, who will present the judge's evaluation.
Good Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. I am Randy Zubek, Deputy Chief Actuary in the CalPERS Actuarial Office. As Scott said, this will be the first of 4 presentations of pension valuations as of June 30, 2023. CalPERS performs over 4,000 individual valuations each year. You're only seeing 4 of them today, which I'm sure you're happy about, but together they do represent about 2/3 of the system. The first 2 systems you'll hear about are relatively small, the judges' plans, and then you'll hear about the state and schools plans afterwards. Now, the judges' plan, okay, let's see if I can advance these. I might need help. Okay. The judges' plan, as most of you probably know, has been closed since 1994, meaning new judges, when they're brought into the CalPERS system, go into the Judges 2 plan, which Julian will talk about following my presentation. This is essentially a closed group of judges that's winding down. It will continue until the last judge passes. The other unique thing about this plan is that, unlike our other plans, pension plans, this plan has not been pre-funded. In other words, there has not been contributions over the years in excess of benefits paid that would result in the buildup of assets. This is essentially a pay-as-you-go system. The money that goes in every year is essentially what's needed to pay out benefits of the members in that following year. Now, by statute, the members and the employer are both required to pay 8% of payroll each year. That's important for the members, of course. That's the amount of money that actually comes out of their paycheck towards their retirement benefit. For purposes of the state, the 8% is not very significant, as it actually requires a lot more than that each year in order to contribute the amount of benefits that are going to be paid in the following year. Next slide. Okay, so if we look at the assets and liabilities of this plan, on the liability side, we have about $2.7 billion, and that's essentially the present value of future benefits expected to be paid from this plan. Assets of just over $50 million. Again, not a very significant amount compared to the size of the system, so it's 1.9% funded. And we expect that the employer will be required to pay about $200.4 million next year to meet the benefits that are expected to be paid. Let's see if I can advance the slides. Okay. Apparently you need the chief actuary to advance the slides. Okay, so the math of the $200.4 million is pretty straightforward, as you can see on this slide. We project that the benefits paid next year will be $201.7 million. We'll get about $1.3 million from the 80 active members in the plan, and that'll leave a difference of $200.4 million that the state will need to contribute next year. Next slide. Looking at the demographics of this plan, we have 80 active judges remaining. They're about 75 years old on average, with 35 years of service, just over 1,600 retirees in pay status, and about somewhere between $15 and $20 million of annual payroll. Next slide. And then lastly, this is just a projection of benefit payouts over the remaining lifetime of this plan. Another unique thing about this plan is that they've essentially hit the top of their expected benefit payout stream. Our other plans are still generally increasing in terms of the amount of benefits being paid each year. This plan is already sort of at the top of that curve and is projected to decline going forward until, again, the last member has passed away. So with that, I will take any questions.
All right. Are there any questions on this plan? I don't see any questions, so is there a motion to, we have approval from Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Pacheco. Roll call, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcava.
Aye.
Teresa Taylor.
Aye.
Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
All right. With that, we will now move on to item 5D, which is the Judges Retirement System 2 actuarial validation. And for that, we have Scott and Mr. Robinson.
Good morning, committee. I'm Julian Robinson, Senior Actuary in the Actuarial Office. Happy to present the results of the Judges Retirement System 2 this morning. Before I start, I'd like to thank my colleagues and the analysts in the office who've supported all of the work behind this valuation and the other valuations which our office conducts. Next slide, please. We're going to cover briefly today the actual valuation of June 30, 2023. This valuation is performed annually to determine the required contributions for the following fiscal year. So we're talking about fiscal year 2024, 2025. And also as part of the valuation process, we assess the PEPRA employee contribution rates necessary. Next slide, please. A few brief comments about the experience of the plan in the previous fiscal year. The investment return of during 2022-23 was 6.9%. The average salary increase was 3.4%. Benefits increased on average by 3%, and the total payroll increase of about 5.5%. Next slide, please. The key results for the system, similar to what Randy presented just earlier, but here are the corresponding results for the JRS2 system. Unlike the JRS system, this is a funded plan, and it's funded on an ongoing basis. The actuarial contribution is determined on an annual basis. The accrued liability in the plan as of June 30, 2023 was approximately $2.4 billion. The market value of assets was $2.3 million. It's 98.8% funded. So it's almost 100% funded, which is a great financial situation for this plan to be in. The discount rate used in this valuation is 6%. Emerging from this valuation, the employer contribution rate for the next fiscal year will be 23.79%, and the PEPRA contribution rate will be 16.75%. The next slide, please. Here's a few more details regarding the employer contribution rate. We have a employer normal cost rate, which is the ongoing cost of benefits accruing in each fiscal year of 22.62% of salary. A unfunded liability contribution, it's relatively small because the plan is in such good condition, of 1.17% to give us a total of 23.79% of salary. The projected payroll for the contribution year is $410 million, and therefore we get an expected contribution for the plan of $97.6 million in the upcoming fiscal year. Next slide, please. Just a quick word about the PEPRA normal cost methodology. The total PEPRA normal cost is determined using the entire active population, that's the classic and PEPRA members, based on the PEPRA benefit provisions until it has satisfied either of the two following thresholds. Either the number of PEPRA members exceeds 50% of the total members, in other words, more than half of the population, active population are PEPRA members, or the other threshold is the PEPRA members exceed 25%, a quarter of the membership, and there's more than 100 PEPRA members. So so as of this past valuation, the June 30, 2023 valuation, the PEPRA thresholds have been met. More than 25% of the population of active judges is now PEPRA, and therefore the PEPRA normal cost determination has been done focusing on the PEPRA members alone. The average entry age for PEPRA members is 4.1 years greater than the classic members. And in general, the higher the entry age leads to a higher normal cost. The last slide, if we could just a quick review of the member contributions. We see the classic count as of June 30, 2023. There's 1,205 classic members. The PEPRA count is 454, so that just puts it over 25%, no, actually 27.4% of the PEPRA population. The classic member total normal cost is 32.98%. Classic judges pay an 8% contribution rate. The PEPRA total normal cost rate is 33.35%, and the PEPRA member contribution rate is 16.75%. With that, if any of the committee has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Are there any questions? I see none. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Pacheco. Roll call, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba. Teresa Taylor. Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
Motion is approved. We will move on to item 5E, the state valuation and employer-employee contribution rates. And for that, we will be joined by Ms. Ramsey. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Nina Ramsey, actuarial team member. Today, I'm here to present to you for your approval the results of the June 30th, 2023 annual valuation for the state plans. This valuation sets forth the employer and employee contribution rates for fiscal year 24-25. Next slide, please. Thank you. And includes the 5-member subgroups listed on this slide. These include state miscellaneous, industrial, safety, peace officers and firefighters, and CHP. Before we get too far in, I need to mention that the attachments for this item were updated late last week on the CalPERS website to reflect a small change in the employer contributions for 2 plans. I believe these slides are updated, but I will make sure as we continue to go along. Next slide, please. There have been a few significant changes since our last valuation. First, the PERF has received a 6.1% investment return as of June 30th, 2023. Second, the state has made additional contributions towards their unfunded liability. In July 2023, the state contributed $1.7 billion, which was allocated to the miscellaneous, industrial, safety, and POF plans according to their proportionate share of the state's general fund. This payment is described further on page 6 of the agenda item. This payment was made after our valuation date and is therefore not included in the funded status as of June 30, 2023, nor is this payment included in the required contributions for fiscal year 24-25. $25 million was contributed to the CHP plan in April of 2023. Because this was ahead of our valuation date, it is included in the funded status, and it has been applied to reduce the fiscal year 24-25 required contributions. This $25 million payment reduced the required contributions for CHP by about $2 million, which is equivalent to about 0.2% of expected payroll. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have some key results for the June 30th, 2023 valuation, as well as from our previous valuation. As of June 30, 2023, we have an accrued liability of $248 billion, a market value of assets of $179 billion, leaving us with an unfunded accrued liability of about $69.5 billion and a funded ratio of 72%. We expect that the contributions for fiscal year 24-25 will be about $8.6 billion, which is $558 million greater than the current year. And just from this slide, I can see that these are the updated numbers. The rates for 24-25 are increasing primarily due to the following reasons. We had a larger than expected non-investment loss as of June 30th, 2023, and we have the progression of existing amortization bases, which is pushing up those contributions. Next slide, please. This slide shows a brief history of the aggregate funded status for the state plans. You can see that we have increased from last year 70.3% to 70.2%. This increase in the funded status is attributable to the additional contributions made by the state during fiscal year 22-23 of $2.95 billion. We have also included the aggregate market value of assets and unfunded accrued liability that I mentioned from the previous slide. Individual figures for each of the 5 plans can be found in attachment 2. Next slide, please. Here we have a comparison of the current year rates and next year's rates. In the center column, we have the projected contribution rates, which were included in last year's annual valuation report. You can see that rates are increasing for all plans. Additionally, the expected contributions in the far right column are all higher than the current year. Final rates do vary from what was projected in last year's valuation. For miscellaneous and industrial, the reason the rate is lower than projected is due to a larger than expected payroll increase. The UAL rate is determined by dividing the required contributions by the expected payroll. So when the payroll is larger than expected, you're dividing by a larger number, which results in a lower rate. For safety, the reason the rate is lower is due to demographic changes within the plan. And for POF and CHP, the rate is higher than projected due to large non-investment losses for each plan. This would include larger than expected salary and COLA increases, which were seen across all plans, but noticeably so for POF and CHP. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have the actuarially required contribution rates for fiscal year 24-25 listed on the left-hand side. We've also included for your information the additional contributions per Government Code 20683.2. These additional rates are for information purposes only and is something that is subject to the state's annual budget process. Next slide, please. Moving on to member contributions. Separate member contribution rates for PEPRA members began January 1st, 2013 with PEPRA. PEPRA member contributions were initially set as half of the normal cost, rounded to the nearest 0.25%. The normal cost is calculated annually, and when it is determined that the normal cost has changed by 1% or more since the last time the PEPRA member contribution rates were set, they will be recalculated. This is the policy we have in place for all of our public agencies. The state employee contribution rates, however, do not adhere to this, as the rates for members are set through collective bargaining. In 2013, state classic and PEPRA member contributions were scheduled to increase to reach half of the normal cost for bargaining groups where the employee contribution rate was less than half. For bargaining units where the member contributions were already greater than half the normal cost, those remained as they were. Since 2013, the majority of member contribution rates have been determined through the collective bargaining process. Next slide, please. There are, however, a few exceptions where the state PEPRA member rates are calculated according to the PEPRA rules that I mentioned. These exceptions include the PEPRA members of the legislature, the California State University, and the judicial branch. These groups do adhere to those PEPRA rules, but as of June 30th, 2023, the normal cost has not changed by 1% or more since the last time those rates were set, so they will not be seeing any changes in fiscal year 24-25. Next slide, please. Additionally, we have a few bargaining units who have agreed that their classic and PEPRA members will contribute half of the normal cost. These bargaining groups are 2, 5, and 18. Each of these groups has their own criteria for when those rates will change, but again, for these groups, the normal cost has not changed by 1% or more, so they will also not be seeing any changes in fiscal year 24-25. Next slide, please. Lastly, we have the projected required rates for all 5 plans. You can see that rates are increasing through fiscal year 27-28. This is due to the ramping in of the June 30th, 2022 investment loss. You may notice a larger increase in fiscal year 27-28, And this is the last year of ramping in the 22 investment loss. The reason it is so noticeable in that year is because the year prior will have seen the full ramp in of the June 30th, 2021 investment gain, which will no longer be offsetting the loss. You may also spot that CHP has a dip in fiscal year 26-27, and this is due to a large amortization base dropping off the year prior. We will release updated projections later this year once our investment return as of June 30th, 2024 is published. And we will also be publishing our full valuation report, which will include our assumptions, methods, and our participant data. This concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Rubalcaba.
Thank you. Very good presentation. I did have just a clarifying question on this non-investment loss.
Yes.
Because also in the judges too, we noticed that the unfunded accrued liability decreased, which is generally a good thing, and the funded ratio improved, which is a very good thing, and yet the employer contribution rates increased. And so the explanation, because it's mostly these non-investment losses. So that's more, can you explain a little bit what you mentioned, salary, you mentioned some demographics, so can you explain what non-investment loss means? Thank you.
Yes. So every year when we perform the valuation, we have two categories that will always be added on. We have the investment loss, which is directly tied to the investment return that we earn, whether it is below or above our discount rate of 6.8%. That will determine if it is a gain or loss. For the non-investment gain or loss piece, that is just us reviewing the changes within the demographics of the plan, meaning all the members within the plan, whether they performed in accordance with our actuarial assumptions, meaning did they earn the exact payroll increase that we expected for them. Our general salary increase assumption is 2.8%. Most plans received greater than that in fiscal year 22-23. So when the salaries go up, that means the liabilities go up higher than we expected them to, generating a loss. The same can be said for COLA increases. With the current inflation situation that we have right now, many members are receiving greater than that 2% COLA benefit increase that we expected. So because those have increased further than we expected, that just means the liability has bumped up higher than we expected, generating a loss. So there are other assumptions within that, but those are the two biggest contributors for this year.
These actuarial assumptions are usually come out of the experience study. So does that mean we can expect some significant changes in the when we do the experience study and then the assumptions are approved for the next cycle?
Yeah, during the next AOM cycle, we look at the all our demographic assumptions, and what we need to keep in mind is we want to take a long-term perspective on these assumptions, and we have to try and weed out short-term fluctuations and try and do our best estimate in terms of where we see inflation going, salary increases, and so forth. But we do take into consideration, what experience has happened over the last, several years compared to what our expectations were, and what our expectations going forward. We bring those back to the board. We have a full discussion about it, and we have the conversation and discussion to kind of let the board know where we're going with, where we see differences based on what we've currently assumed and any changes going forward.
Because I know that there's been a lot of varied views about mortality tables, how they've been changing versus the pandemic.
Yeah,
and back and forth. So looking forward to see we land on that.
Our mortality has, we made some fairly significant adjustments several years ago, and that's a key driver in terms of assumptions. I think we're going to be keen on inflation, salary increases going forward. Those seem to be deviating the most currently, and we're going to try and make our best estimate in terms of where we see these changes going in the future. Because when you think about you can have a few years of salary increases really high, but are you really going to have 20 years of those increases year after year after year way at that level? So we need to make a reasonable assessment of where they are on a long-term basis.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any other comments? And motion to approve? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Aye.
Teresa Taylor. Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
Thank you. And with that, we will now move on to item 5F. And for that, Mr. Tashida, I hope I did that correctly, will join us.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and yes, it's Paul Cheetah. Very good job. Most people don't pronounce that anywhere even close to correct. So, Senior Actuary in the CalPERS Actuarial Office, and you've heard a lot of actuarial evaluation information today, and I'm here to discuss, last but not least, the schools pool, which is the largest component of CalPERS by membership, so by head count of membership. I would be presenting the results of the actuarial evaluation and the recommended employer and employee contribution rates. Let's see if I can master the clicker that others have struggled with. Apparently not. Thank you. So the valuation date, like the other plans you've heard about, is June 30 of 2023, and that sets the recommended contributions that we're recommending to you for fiscal year 24-25, so the fiscal year that is coming up. And all participating school employers in the pool pay the same rate, so it's essentially a risk pool. Next slide, please. There are three key elements of experience that I would like to touch on that were incorporated in this valuation. The first was the investment return of 6.1% that you've already heard about for the state. That's the perf-wide number. Typically, the investment return is a fairly significant driver of our results one way or the other. It's, whether it's a gain or a loss. This year, 6.1% is relatively close to the discount rate of 6.8%. So there is a small actuarial loss that came from it, but it's a pretty small player relative to some of the other factors that we saw in this valuation. A much bigger factor was salary increases. So for active members in the schools pool, the average increase was 9.8% in salary, which is quite sizable, and that's for the year ending June 30 of 2023. So that produced a more sizable actuarial loss. This would be an example of a non-investment loss that Nina was talking about. And another very important element of experience is the total pool payroll, which increased by 13.9% from the prior year, and that is quite a bit larger than our 2.8% assumption. And so we will see how that, we'll see in a few slides how that affects the rate, but that is really a product of the prior item, the salary increases, combined with a fairly sizable growth in just the total headcount of the active population of the schools pool. Next slide, please. The key results are summarized here on this slide, and I want to note three particular things. The first is just that you see the accrued liability and the market value of assets increased from last year to this year. And if you look at the unfunded accrued liability as dollar amount, it did increase a bit over last year, and the funded ratio ticked down a little bit from 67.9 to 67.5%. That deterioration in the funded status of the pool is due primarily to those salary increases, those sizable salary increases that we saw on the prior slide. The discount rate was unchanged. And the contribution rates that we are recommending to the board, both for the employers in the schools pool as well as the Pepper employees, are shown here. So the employer rate is increasing by 37 basis points from 26.68% to 27.05%. And the Pepper member rate is not changing. It will remain 8%. Now on the next slide, we'll see a more detailed look at the employer contribution rate from last year to this year. So if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So a lot of numbers here, but a few things to note. First is that increase in the employer contribution rate that we talked about from last year to this year. So the 26.68% moving to the 27.05% actual rate for this upcoming fiscal year. So that's that 37 basis point increase we talked about. The second item I'd like to note is that in the middle column, we show what we estimated the rate would be this year based on last year's valuation. And we estimated it would be 27.8%. So it's really coming in 27.0, 27.1. So quite a bit lower than what we had projected. And the culprit for that, the reason for that, is the third item I'd like to point out, which is that projected payroll. So you see that in last year's valuation, the payroll that came into play and the contributions was $16.7 billion. We estimated that this year that would increase to $17.2 billion approximately. Well, it's really coming in more like 19.0, 19.1, so quite a bit above what we projected. And again, that's driven by that 13.9% payroll increase that I spoke about a few slides ago. Well, when you have a higher payroll, what happens to the employer contribution rate is that it serves to push it down a little bit. And that is because one of the components of the contribution is a payment towards the unfunded liability. That payment is determined as a dollar amount. It's not determined as a rate, it's determined as a dollar amount. And then to convert that to a rate that employers pay, you divide it by the payroll. So when the payroll goes up, you're increasing the denominator of that calculation, and you actually end up with a lower contribution rate. So you can think of it as the same dollar amount is going to be, we expect the same dollar amount to be coming in, but it's spread over a wider base, and therefore the rate itself goes down a little bit. So that went a long ways towards mitigating potential increase in that rate. Okay, next slide, please. Here's a 10-year history of the funded status, both the funded ratio on the top, as well as the unfunded liability as a dollar amount on the bottom, which is the white bars in the bottom. So this is just showing the same information you saw a couple slides ago, where the funded ratio ticked down from 67.9 to 67.5. Fairly steady, just a very mild decrease there. And again, with a corresponding small increase in the unfunded accrued liability. Again, the largest driver is those salary increases we saw. Also want to note that there were, you'll recall there were several discount rate changes over the course of this 10-year history. The beginning of this period, we were at 7.5%, and now we're at 6.8%. And of course, every time you lower the discount rate, you increase the unfunded liability a bit, and you decrease the funded ratio. So that's part of what's behind some of the dropping that you're seeing on this slide. Okay, next slide, please. So again, PEPR member contribution rate is something that we determine as part of the actuarial evaluation, and the PEPR members of the schools pool are subject to the requirement that they pay 50% of the normal cost. So we do the calculation every year and to see whether the total normal cost for the PEPR members changed by more than 1%. And this year it did not. You may recall that last year it did change. A year or two ago, it was triggered by the decrease in the discount rate. Well, they pushed it over the edge, and the member rate increased to 8%. Well, this year, it is staying the same. The total normal cost has not changed by enough to trigger change to the member rate. So they will still pay 8%. Now, what's noteworthy in the schools pool is that it's fairly sizable in terms of the PEPRA percentage of it. So 62% by head count of the schools pool are PEPRA members. And by payroll is 54%. So well over half of the schools pool has already switched from Classic to PEPRA. Next slide, please. Also, as part of the actuarial evaluation, we refresh our analysis of where we think contribution rates might go in the future. So this is our best estimate based on what we know today, assuming all of our actuarial assumptions in the future are met, including the 6.8% investment return for this year and all subsequent years. And you see we start at 27.05% for this coming fiscal year that we are recommending. And you see that we expect the rate to increase for the next 3 fiscal years before then starting a slight decline after that. And the reason for the increase in the next 3 years is exactly what Nina discussed for the state valuation, which is you still have that sizable investment loss from fiscal 21-22 that is still being ramped in. And that's really the main driver, the key driver behind that increase that you're seeing there. And then once that's fully phased in, then you have other, you're more in a steady state at that point. And the slow changeover we've been seeing from classic to PEPRA continues to take its effect, which serves to slowly drop the contribution rate over time. So hopefully 27, 28, we reach our peak and go down from there. Okay, that is the end of my prepared remarks. I'm happy to take any questions the committee has.
Mr. Pacheco.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your presentation. I actually want to go back to that last slide, which is the projected employer contribution rate. And you mentioned that if we, hypothetically, if we did bring in our, we had an increase in our return and exceed our return, hopefully we could see a decrease, in a projected decrease in the employer contribution. I just wanted to know of your thoughts around that.
Well, that's correct. So this projection, like I said, assumes that we get 6.8% return in the year we're currently in, and of course we're already at April. Right. We're not going to surmise what the return might be, but yes, if the return for the fiscal year we're in now comes in above 6.8%, that's going to bend this curve down a little bit. The 27.05 beginning point is fixed. That's not going to change, but returns over 6.8% would help to push that down. And of course, the amount by which it's pushed down would depend on how strong the investment return is. But yes, if we get over 6.8%, then hopefully we should see this curve a little bit lower than what we're portraying here.
I do recall from our March meeting during our trust review, we did see for the first quarter, I think it was like 10.3% increase in our return. But I mean, that is promising. There is promise there. Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Palkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Sort of tying into Mr. Pacheco's comments, looking at the long term, the 10, 20 years down the road, do you see this trend of dropping even further, or do you see it sort of stalling?
In terms of the drop in the employer rate that we're projecting here? Yeah. So there's a few things. There's really two things going on that's underlying this projection. We try not to think too far beyond 5 years, because I mean even 5 years is a bit of a stretch, because there's so much experience coming in every year that changes. And beyond 5 years, you lose more and more value as you go on time, kind of like a weather forecast. But we're going to see two main forces happen here. We have the unfunded liability payment stream that is playing out. Now we have amortization bases in existence for every past evaluation and the investment and non-investment experience that came in. So those are going to continue to unwind themselves, and so it may not be a smooth drop, but there's a little bit of undulation in that. But we should see those over the long term trend down, assuming we don't add anything new in the future, right? And the other aspect, the other thing that is changing is the normal cost rate. Now, the normal cost rate that's the cost of benefits accruing in the coming future years. That rate we expect that to continue. It has been, and we expect it to continue to slowly decline over time. And that's because as the active membership changes from classic to PEPRA, you have a lower benefit structure, less costly benefit structure, and the normal cost is correspondingly lower. So we do see the employer normal cost is slowly trending down over time, and that's probably that is the main driver of what you're seeing in the last 2 years there of that chart, is that gradual decline, and we do expect that to continue into the future until the population is wholly PEPRA.
Thank you.
So if I heard correctly, you're projecting that we will peak in terms of employer contribution rate at 29% in fiscal year 27-28, and at least looking ahead for 5 years, that number should continue to go down. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, so continue to go down beyond this chart, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers. I don't have the number. We are able to produce a longer projection. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't want to say anything definitive at this particular meeting. But yes, the long-term trend after 27-28 is the long-term trend is a decline. There may be years in our projection that maybe there's a pop-up for some reason because of the amortization basis playing out. But yeah, the long-term trend I would say is a gradual decline.
Okay. And this may be a question that Scott will have to jump in on, but is there reason to believe the schools, in terms of when they're going to peak at a employer contribution rate, are going to get to that peak sooner than the state and other public agencies, or are the three systems going to be relatively consistent?
I would think overall they're going to get there fairly consistently. I think you got to take and look at individual plans as being a little bit different. If you look at the state, they're about 2% funded better than the schools are, and I think that's attributable to the additional contributions that the state puts in each year on behalf of the state plans. Those additional $1 billion of contributions, just move up the point at which the contributions will get lowered. I think your biggest drivers are going to be really what happens, with the investment returns over the next few years. That's going to be the biggest drivers on where most of the plans go.
Thank you. That makes sense. Are we moving to a greater percentage of employees who are PEPRA at a rate that is relatively consistent with expectations, or is that happening at a slightly increased rate?
So speaking for the schools pool specifically, it's tracking fairly well, I would say, to what we would project. Other plans in some of the public agency plans maybe have different experience, but schools pool in particular, yeah, it's tracking fairly closely.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? If I could get a motion to approve, Mr. Pacheco, a second. Ms. President Taylor, roll call vote, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Aye.
Teresa Taylor.
Aye.
Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
And I want to thank all of the presenters on these issues for being so informed and so on top of the issues and the questions. We really appreciate it. With that, we will move on to 5G, the funding risk mitigation policy, and for that, it's Ms. Nix and Scott.
Scott deserted me, so I'll just give you a little break from the valuation reports, and we'll start the funding risk mitigation policy. Okay, so at the February, he came back. He undeserted me. At the February meeting, staff was directed to come back in April with proposed changes to the CalPERS funding risk mitigation policy, and those include removing the automatic provision from the policy, as well as adding in a requirement to bring the proposed changes to the board for discussion if the actual investment return exceeds the discount rate by 2%. Next slide. As you recall from our February information item, the purpose of the policy is to reduce CalPERS funding risk over time and thereby increase the long-term sustainability of the CalPERS pension benefits for our members. Slide 3, please. I presented this history in February, but a quick overview is that it was first adopted in 2015, and then we suspended the policy in 2017 through 2020, while the discount rate was lowered from 7.5% to 7%. This policy was first triggered in 2021 due to the investment returns earning at 21%, and then it was brought to the board as an information item in February 2024 as committee direction. Next slide, please. There are several mechanisms that I wanted to point out that are currently in place for lowering the discount rate, and those will not change with these proposed changes of the policy. The first one is the board can just decide at any time to change the discount rate. Secondly, the ALM process at both the mid-year and at the ALM year will allow us to evaluate those discount rates and make sure that we're on track with our assumptions, and you have an ability at that point in time to change the discount rate. And lastly, the funding risk mitigation policy when it is triggered. Slide 5. So the policy proposed before you today has the following changes. We remove the automatic mechanism to reduce the discount rate in a year where the excess returns exceed the discount rate. We added a requirement to bring a proposed discount rate change to the board if returns exceed at least 2% of the discount rate. We updated procedural steps that would have occurred if the automatic provision was in place, but since we removed it, we removed those provisions. And we updated to the new template, made some minor grammatical edits, and removed the affiliate funds from the scope because the policy was really never intended to include those due to their more conservative approach to both the valuation and the funding. So next slide, please. We are looking for a decision today to approve the proposal with the items changed as discussed in the previous slide. And the last slide, if you'll change it to that. I'm pleased to take questions if anybody has any.
Are there any questions? Ms. President Taylor.
Just a quick, I really appreciate all of your report back, and thank you for coming back with what we asked for. So I just want to make sure that if it comes up that we make 2% over, 27%, 21%, whatever, and you bring it to us, back to us, and we vote, what would be the vote? No on it, right?
Well, if you accept the proposed changes in this policy, then what will happen is if our investment returns exceed the discount rate by 2% or more, and there's a little chart in the actual policy,
right,
we'll bring that back to the board as an action item, and then you'll have a discussion at that point to determine whether or not you want to reduce the discount rate as proposed when we bring it back, or to something different, or not
do it at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I want to thank you for bringing this back, and this is a change that for some of us we've wanted to see made for a long time. This retains discretion on the part of the board to be able to make decisions based on the actual facts on the ground at a time that we exceed the projected rate of return, and most of us are always in favor of retaining that discretion where we can. I don't see any other questions or comments, but before we go to a vote on this, we do have at least one public comment. Mr. Pena.
Good morning. Johnny Pena with the League of California Cities, here to testify in support of the recommended amendments to the risk mitigation policy. And thanks again to staff for the excellent update and report. While we certainly appreciate the original intent to help balance pension plan risk, funding, and costs, the reality is that any change to the discount rate can have a dramatic impact on employer cost. Retirement benefits are only as secure as an agency's ability to pay for them, and Cal Cities remains concerned about any prospective increase of employer contribution rates. Given the significance of such a change, it is our belief that any adjustment to the discount rate merits a discussion of the board, and the stakeholders should have the opportunity to weigh in on that decision. Thank you for considering local government employer cost when making this decision, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Are there any other public comments? All right. If I could get a motion to approve, Mr. Pacheco, second, Mr. Rubalcaba. Roll call, please.
David Miller.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino.
Aye.
Jose Luis Pacheco.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcaba. Aye. Teresa Taylor. Aye. Yvonne Walker.
Aye.
Item is approved. We now move on to information agenda items. Long-term care evaluation report, item 6A. Hold on. There we go.
Sorry. Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. Item 6A is a review of the long-term care evaluation results, because we know you like your actuarial results on a Monday morning. So next slide, please. Okay, the background on this is an annual agenda item which discloses the funded status of the long-term care program. All information is as of June 30th, 2023. And this presentation highlights the key aspects of the report, but for your convenience, the full report is attached to this agenda item. Next slide. Okay, so as of 6/30/2023, the margin for the program was negative 19.01%, and the funded ratio was 90%. Now, as a reminder, the margin is a measure of what percentage the premiums need to increase or decrease to make the plans whole. And the funded ratio is simply the assets on hand divided by the cost of the plan. On the next page, we'll go over the reconciliation for what happened from last year to this year. So last year when I came here, I reported that the margin for 6/30/2022 was a negative 7.4%, and the funded ratio was 95%. Like the pension plans, we look at the experience of the long-term care program, and we compare that to what we assumed was going to happen that year. Now, the biggest driver for 22-23 was the investment return. We assume that we're going to get 4.75% on the portfolio, and this year we actually lost 0.6%. So that caused a decrease in the margin of about a negative 8.54%, and lowered the funded status to 91%. So after that, each year we also do an experience study, and we make sure that our actuarial assumptions are still relevant for the future of the program. This year, we determined that we noticed that the claim termination period, which is the period that our policyholders are staying on claim, was a bit longer than what we anticipated. And so due to that change and that assumption, the margin went down by 3.13%, and that's how we ended up today at the margin of negative 19.01% and a funded ratio of 90%. Next slide. So this concludes the presentation. Short and sweet, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve? Oh, excuse me, this is an information item. My apology. Yes. Thank you. We'll move on then to item 6B, the semi-annual health plan financial report.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Emily Zong, CalPERS team member. This is agenda item 6B, semi-annual health plan financial report. It's an information item. This report provided to the committee twice a year as part of the monitoring and reporting process for the healthcare fund status. It includes health plan account balances, actual reserve amount, and surpluses or deficits for the health plan sub-account. Next slide, please. The semi-annual health plan financial report provides the financial performance of the PPO and HMO plan as of the end of 2023. HMO fully insured plans such as Kaiser and the association plan are not in the scope of this report. As a reminder, the healthcare fund reserve policy provides a framework for maintaining the appropriate actual reserve level for the PPO and for managing surpluses or deficits that accumulate in the PPO and HMO sub-account. The funding status figure I'm reporting to you today are related to fully funded reserve amount prescribed by that policy. In November, I shared with the committee the fund status for the PPO subaccount as of the end of June 2023. In the next few slides, I will give you an update for the basic and Medicare PPO performance for the second half of 2023. Next slide, please. This slide presents the recent Health Care Fund performance for the HMO Basic and PPO Medicare and Basic plan. In this table, starting with the HMO Basic plan, the estimated fund balance at the end of 2023 was $251 million. The next column shows the HMO Basic estimated claim liability of $182 million, with the last column showing a surplus of $69 million. On the PPO side, starting with Medicare, the estimated fund balance at the end of 2023 was $31 million. We estimated liability and required actuarial reserve level of $138 million for a fund status of $107 million below the recommended fully reserved level. For the PPO Basic plan, the estimated fund balance as of the end of 2023 was $36 million. After estimated claim liability and required actuarial reserve of $594 million, the fund status for PPO Basic plan was $558 million below the recommended fully reserved level. The overall basic PPO status worsened by about $161 million from the end of June 2023. I'll go through some detail for the basic and Medicare PPO performance in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. In November, we reported the basic PPO was $356 million below the recommended reserve level as of the end of June 2023. As more claim has been processed and more data become available, the updated data worsened by $41 million is now $397 million below the fully reserved level. For the second half of 2023, there was about $137 million decrease in the fund balance related to high medical experience. For the PPO Basic member, they normally satisfy the annual deductible early in the year. So medical costs are normally lower in the first half of the year and increase in the second half of the year. We also especially saw a rise in claim during the fourth quarter as a result of member altering the behavior to utilize care before the co-insurance and deductible are reset at the end of the year. And also on top of that, we observed more healthy members have moved from PPO to HMO plan due to the high premium increases. This change in member mix contribute to the increased utilization in the basic PPO. The overall medical cost in 2023 for PPO Basic plan increased by about 11% from 2022. For pharmacy, while we have the best in market pricing under our current Optum contract, the high utilization and more use of high-cost brand and specialty drugs contribute to about $54 million loss for the second half of 2023. The 2023 PPO Basic premium include a surcharge of 2% in platinum and 3% in gold to replenishing the PPO reserve. We collected about $27 million in the surcharge for the second half of 2023. There was also a small investment gain of $3 million allocated to the basic PPO plan. The overall basic PPO fund status worsened by $161 million from the end of June, bringing the total fund status below the fully reserved level by $558 million as of the end of 2023. Next slide, please. Moving on to PPO Medicare, in November, we reported that the PPO Medicare was $62 million below fully reserved status as of the end of June 2023. The updated fund status worsened by $15 million and is now $77 million below the fully reserved level. So for the second half of 2023, there was about $10 million decrease in fund balance due to the higher than expected medical costs. While we know the Medicare fee schedule have been stable increase over the years, but we do see members tend to utilize more services after the pandemic. The overall medical cost in 2023 for PPO Medicare plan increased by around 9% from 2022. On the pharmacy side, the increase due to the high-cost specialty drug contribute to about $21 million reduction in fund balance for the second half of 2023. There was also a very small investment gain of $1 million allocated to the Medicare plan. The overall PPO Medicare fund status worsened by $30 million in the second half of 2023, bringing the fund balance $107 million below the fully reserved level. But however, we do expect the Medicare status will improve as cash payments are expected to come in the form of pharmacy rebate and federal subsidy from CMS attributed to the 2023 plan year. We will report back when the 2023 pharmacy rebate and subsidies are fully reconciled. Next slide, please. As you know, the board have approved 2 key rate actions to address the PPO funding status and the longer-term viability of the PPO program. First, a 2 to 3% surcharge was included in the basic PPO premium in 2023 and has increased to 4 to 5% to the 2024 premium. So our goal is to generate additional premium revenue to continue replenishing the reserve. And second, the transition from the 2 risk pool to a single risk pool risk adjustment method to further stabilize premium for basic HMO and PPO plans. This transition is through a 3-year phasing process, starting from 2024 and fully implement in 2026, for the purpose to reduce the member migration movement and stabilize the member mix going forward. Additionally, we are exploring the other way to improve the PPO program through the solicitation for a new 5-year contract from 2025 to 2029. We are seeking a new performance guarantee in the contract to ensure the third-party administrator is financially responsible for keeping the cost at or below the agreed-upon threshold. And to address the increasing pharmacy costs, we plan to explore pharmacy saving option in our next pharmacy benefit manager contract solicitation that is currently underway. That concludes my presentation. We're happy to take any question.
All right. Mr. Pacheco.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman Middleton. I'd like to ask you, first of all, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. I want to ask you a question about the drivers with respect to the healthcare fund status in terms of the medical drivers. You mentioned that the utilization of individuals was increased uptake, but also I'm just curious if medical inflation also had a contributing factor as well.
Yeah, that is correct. As I mentioned earlier, from 2022 to 2023, we saw about 11% increase for the medical costs for the basic plans. So that basically a very high level breakdown. As everybody knows, the cost of services have increased quite a lot in the healthcare market. The increase in the labor, increase in the material for providing the cost. So out of the 11%, we do expect about 4 to 5% is contribute to the cost of the services. And also the member tend to use a little bit more utilization after the pandemic. So that's at about 2 to 3%. So the very last factor is the member migration, right? So more healthy members have moved from PPO to HMO, so the remaining program are generally a bit sicker. So that's account for another 2 to 3%.
And are you still seeing the utilization of members still utilizing, after post-COVID?
At this point, we don't see the trend declining at this point, but different people have a different view at this point. Some people, they do expect will eventually declining back to the pre-COVID level. Other people are also exploiting this type of utilization pattern will keep remaining for the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit of color to Emily's good answer, it really also varies when you look from modality to modality. So, we've talked about this some in the past, but behavioral health utilization, for example, is staying very high, not coming down. In areas that were particularly impacted, where people We're having a hard time getting appointments, for example, still high. You know, a lot of the actuarial community, and Emily, jump in if you want to expand upon this, are thinking that things are starting to normalize somewhat, but there are these sticky areas that just remain high.
And just to clarify, just a follow-up on that, Don. So our long-term solutions is what, with respect to the 25-29 PPO contracting solicitation, that would hopefully address some of those issues.
So we have, you know, one of the things that we have that I would include as sort of hallmark of the PPO solicitation is the request that that proposals include, for lack of a better description, financial responsibility for higher than negotiated price trend. So if we see contracts coming back at a higher level than were projected in the contract, a portion of those costs will be paid back to us by whoever we contract with. That's part of what we are seeking. You know, the other piece, which is a longer-term play, of course, are the Office of Healthcare Affordability spending targets, which you know, will set a rate at which will, you know, trigger initially conversations between insurers or provider groups or others, and OCA, and eventually transition into penalties.
Thank you very much, Don. I appreciate it very much.
Don, when we see these reports, we tend to see a lot of churn between the PPO and the HMO, between this provider organization and that provider organization. And it becomes more difficult to get a handle on what's the overall total growth in terms of costs that are coming into the system, and how concerned we should be in terms of that total number. And as I look at some of these numbers here, I start to get very concerned in terms of what this is going to mean in terms of overall system costs, and preparing our members for some of the hard decisions that are going to have to be made in future years regarding those costs.
I think that's a point extremely well taken. You know, we're also seeing, as you know, significant disparities in the costs we're seeing on the HMO side and the PPO side. Some of that will level as we go to a single risk pool. So some of what you're seeing is just risk shift from the HMO to the PPO, meaning actually from the PPO to the HMO. We're seeing the low risk folks going from the PPO to the HMO. You know, at some point that will reduce when the surcharge is gone, although that's projected to be a number of years off. But no, it's a point extremely well taken. And I think some of the motivation behind the affordability, the affordability board and the spending growth targets, because employers are and purchasers are feeling that across the state.
Well, I want to defer to Mr. Rubalcaba and the Pension and Healthcare Committee, but I think without getting into another master's thesis, we need to start looking at what are the projections moving forward for a few years in terms of total cost to the system, and how are we going to respond to that, and how are we going to communicate to our members what to expect. Okay, all right. Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Rubalcaba.
Thank you for speaking to this concern, Madam Chair. But it is, I think what we see here, this presentation reflects the real dynamics, how cost trends are increasing in healthcare, and also how the delivery systems make a difference between PPO and HMO, where there's the role of managing the care, especially for chronic illness. But at the same time, I think this board has made some very innovative moves, like the whole risk pool, where we'll see, I mean, something that should make a big difference. And in this solicitation, looking forward to it bringing some results. And I think we have some very good staff and very good thinkers. We're very fortunate, so I'm looking forward to us addressing the deficit. I mean, one is recognizing it, two is what do we do? And so I look forward to us continuing to work on this issue. It is a little scary, but I think we're up for it, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then this was, again, an information item. We will move on to summary of committee direction. I don't recall any.
No, Madam Chair, I took no committee direction for the FAC.
Okay. And do we have any public comments? We do not. Then we've reached the conclusion of this committee meeting. It's the last meeting of the day, so we will be adjourned and we will reconvene for the full Board of Administration meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you.